How do you stay sane and manage difficult emotions when you're working on a cause, when you're an activist, or when you're working with difficult topics such as bias, racism, and discrimination? Well, today I'm talking with Janelle Aaker, who is a diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist who's worked for Nike, Lululemon, and other companies. She uses a mindfulness approach to help have communications and conversations about these difficult topics, as well as manage her emotions. And she also gives some really practical advice of how to support these topics and how to work with emotions that arise when doing so. Right. Well, today I have the great pleasure to talk with Janelle Aaker, who worked in diversity, equity, and inclusion for Nike, and then as a VP of DEIA for Lululemon. She is now a freelance consultant. She is also a meditation teacher trainee, just like me. She lives in Vancouver with her 3 kids and her husband, and she has been a whistleblower. So you can rest assured that this is going to be a very, very interesting discussion. Janelle, welcome.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm really honored.
Thank you so much. And we have such an interesting history because we met during a silent online retreat. So for 7 days, we saw each other's face, but we've actually never talked.
Not until today.
Not until today.
Which is kind of wild, but it is a unique experience to be in a silent retreat with others, and for us it was virtual, and so we share that unique experience together, and it's nice that we've come back around and are connecting in this way.
So Janelle, one thing I'm really curious about is, tell me, what led you to diversity, equity, and inclusion work? What got you into that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. And a lot of people ask that. It was, for many of us practitioners, I think it's by chance. When I was younger, it wasn't necessarily a career that I even knew about or thought about. But when you look back on my life, you can see the roads that led me here. And so when I think back of some early childhood experiences, I'm an empath. And so, early on, I would feel other people's emotions or feel when someone felt excluded. And so, in those early primary education days, I was often that person that was trying to include others. And as time went on and I, kind of gained my voice, I became really active in student government. And so, whether that was class president or, even through college, being in the multicultural club or in the student senate, I was always drawn towards these leadership roles. And at the heart of these leadership roles is the responsibility to be a voice for others. So when you're in a position like that, an elected position, you are working on behalf of a constituency. And just by nature of signing up for that and doing that, I at least honed my skills of listening and hearing other people's experiences, even if they were different than mine and we're from the same community. But consistently and constantly listening to others and then translating that to oftentimes people in positions of power. And so I was honing that ever since 7th grade class president. I held a elected leadership role through my senior year of college. And then my first full-time role out of college was at the University of Portland in admissions, and quickly stepped into this role where I was leading some of the diversity recruitment efforts for the university. I asked to do that. I kind of naturally fell into that because it was an interest of mine. But I wanted to be part of that work. And then from there, I went to Nike into recruitment and quickly made my way to diversity staffing. And so it just it was always where I was drawn to.
Yeah, and I know you're really very outspoken on LinkedIn. You're calling companies out, you're calling patterns out. So I'm thinking about, the courage it takes to put yourself out there. Where do you get the courage from? Because I'm sure you face pushback on occasion.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because it does oftentimes require me to bolster up a courage to say what I believe needs to be said, or to post what I believe needs to be posted. And it's always my opinion, and there will be others that disagree, and they're welcome to disagree. But, based on my life experiences and what I've seen and experienced, I have a point of view on things. And I think, for me, it's important for me to share my point of view. And I would say early on, I talked about my advocacy for, other students or constituents, because I kind of got into that habit. It's always been, for whatever reason, somewhat easy for me to speak on behalf of others. What I've only recently really, garnished the power, I guess, or the courage to speak for myself. That's more recent, because, for many reasons, I just found it more difficult to ask for what I wanted or needed. It was easier for me, or I felt more drawn to speak for others. And so, to your question, especially when it came to being a whistleblower, that was not something that I decided overnight. I mulled that over for a long time. I actually endured things that were uncomfortable for a very long time, and did a whole bunch of convincing myself that maybe I was overreacting, or convincing myself that everybody else has it the same as I do, but then deciding, well, we shouldn't have it this way. And then, there was a whole lot of inner dialogue happening before I took the step of being a whistleblower. And I think, what ultimately got me to that point was I just decided, it was really more of some self-development work. I decided that my happiness really depended on me saying something. I couldn't brush it under the rug anymore. I couldn't allow others to have the same experiences that I was having. I felt like, if not me, then who? And if not now, then when? And so that was ultimately, the inner conversation that happened when I finally said, okay, today's the day, no more.
That's really, really powerful. And what strikes me in that, and what you said before, is sort of coming back to yourself, right? Not in a selfish way, but really attuning to your own happiness, and
Yes.
also your own needs, right? You've been a giver,
Yes.
and empaths are often givers. I really get that. And to realize, oh, wait, I matter in this too. My happiness matters. And I think that's incredibly powerful. Talking about self-care, I wonder how much your mindfulness practice plays a role in that, and in tending to yourself also, and not just to the world.
100%. When I stepped forward, it was after I had already started a mindfulness practice. I had already been on an inner journey of self-development. And it was through the real work of self-love, that I got to the point where I knew that I deserved to be happy. And I knew that I could speak my truth. And no matter what happened after that, it didn't matter. Didn't matter what other people thought. It didn't even matter the outcome of, an investigation or anything like that. I was actually quite detached from the outcome. I simply needed to release my truth. And that was the most important thing.
That's incredibly powerful. And I see you do that on LinkedIn. So I highly, if you're listening, recommend that you follow Janelle on LinkedIn, and we'll come back to how to get in touch with Janelle. One of the things that's making me think about, you talked about self-love. And when I think about some of the topics you deal with, confronting racism, right, bias, Native American genocide, inequalities in payment, and so on. It's difficult to confront these things. Now, I grew up in Germany, so confronting the Holocaust was something that I grew up with, and now I see this happening in the U.S. and Canada, where we confront some of the issues that have been happening here: slavery, Native American genocide, and how they're still influencing us. And it brings up painful emotions on all ends. How can we deal with that? And how can mindfulness help, in your opinion?
I see this all the time where it's the even the conversation, even starting a conversation on some of these topics that are so sensitive and emotional. It can be difficult for everyone involved. It can be difficult for people who have a lot of lived experience with the topic or people with little lived experience. We're all human. And I think by nature, we will have emotions about especially the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion, things that have happened to communities and individuals. It's going to bring up emotions. And so, I think for many of us practitioners in this work, we're starting to recognize the emotional labor of this work. This work differs from other types of work. When I think of a corporate environment, that's where most of my experience has been. I've worked alongside thousands of other employees that have had very different roles than I did in the organization, with all of their own unique challenges. I think every role provides its own unique challenges and opportunities. And when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion work, by nature of the work, we're talking about harm oftentimes. And when talking about harm, it can get very emotional. Listening to someone tell you about the harm that's happened to them, or experiencing harm yourself, those types of things stay with you for a long time, or can stay with you for a long time. And so when it comes, what I've learned, and why I'm studying to be a mindfulness teacher is, I don't even know if I'll become an actual teacher of it. I just know it's going to serve me in my life and the work that I do, because I think as these emotions arise, through mindfulness, we can, I know you talk about befriending them. And I would love to talk more about that, because we can start to befriend them. And then we can, continue to have the conversation. Conversations get difficult in this work, and we can continue through the conversation instead of jumping out of the conversation when we want to. When it starts to get tough, we want to exit the conversation. I think through mindfulness, we can continue through, and we can keep having the dialogue, keep creating change, and ultimately equity for everyone, and ensuring that everyone can thrive.
Yeah, thank you. That's beautiful. And one of the ways I think about it is staying in the room when it gets difficult.
Yes.
You stay in the room. And so what comes up for me is, why is it important? Why does it matter that we look at diversity, equity, inclusion? Why is it not just a nice to have?
My why, I truly, fundamentally, I believe that every single person, one, deserves to be happy, and they have worth. Every single human has worth, and every single human deserves to be happy. And when I think about my happiness and my ability to thrive, I think, I can't thrive unless everyone around me is thriving, and my community is thriving, and the world is thriving. And obviously we're far from everyone thriving. But while I'm here, I'm going to keep having this effort to create the access for everyone to thrive. And so it's really about my wholeness and everyone else's wholeness. And so the reason I do this work is deep down in, kind of the core of who I am and my sense of purpose. Now, when you talk about doing this work in corporations, because that's the place that I work in, that's the work that I do. Organizations are going to have many different reasons to do this. I think, again, at the heart of it, no business can survive if the community isn't thriving, if there aren't consumers to buy your product, if there aren't, people to utilize your services, and if you want your business to continue to succeed and thrive, not only do you need your communities to be thriving to interact with you, but, as an organization, if you want to innovate and evolve, that really requires different points of view and different ways of thinking. And so that's where that diversity comes in, diversity of thought, diversity of experience. And so you really need to bring in that diversity into your organization, and then you need to allow that diversity to thrive. So that's where the equity and inclusion comes in. Companies and articles have been talking about the business case for DEI for decades. And that business case has been proven time and time again. And so I feel like we all should be past that conversation. It's absolutely a truth. There is a business case for it. Businesses that, invest in and focus on DEI efforts do outperform those that don't. But at the heart of it, I think beyond the business case, every organization has a role to play in society. And with that, being a social citizen, it's about building up the communities in the world.
We know the business case, and yes, that's important. That's good.
Yeah.
And we're dealing with corporations that are largely for profit, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And then there's also just that human decency, that societal aspect of, okay, that's something that we can do as a society because we're a wealthy society, right? And really often when I look at what holds us back, there is a lot of fear and scarcity. Scarcity. If they have more, I have less. So fear, talking about emotions, is really a big hindrance here. And I've heard people outright say, I don't want my children to have less privilege. That's a fear-driven statement. When you hear that, how do you manage your emotions around that, and how do you respond?
Yeah. First and foremost, I try. I don't always get this right, but my goal is to always hear people out and empathize. So if someone were to say that they fear that their children won't have the same privileges if others are being, lifted up, or some equity efforts are giving others, more opportunities, and they think that maybe their children won't have as many opportunities or will be disadvantaged in some way. First and foremost, as a parent, I can empathize with the essence behind that fear. I can empathize with wanting the best for your children and, wanting your community to, succeed and prosper and all that. And I think as humans, we are hardwired oftentimes in this scarcity model, and to want to kind of hoard or ensure, that mine and my own are okay. With all that, I empathize. Anytime someone is incredibly against DEI efforts or against, hearing what I'm trying to say, I don't take it personally. I used to, but I've gotten better. So I really work on not taking it personally, and I really work on empathizing and hearing what they're saying and what is behind, whether it's fear or frustration or anger, because all of that is just human. And I've been there too on different topics. One, I try to meet them where they're at. What I might realize is now is not the time to continue the conversation. Or I stay, just like we were talking about, and I encourage them to stay. I help them maybe see things in a different way, that it doesn't have to be about, less for your children. Let's look at what your children will gain. If there's more diversity in their schools and more diversity at their workplaces, all of their friends have equal access to, the extracurricular activities and whatnot. Whatever it is that your children want, your neighbor's children probably want that too. Children in the other country probably want that too. And so how do we, rather than think of it as what are we going to lose, let's think about it like, what are we going to still have, and what can others have with us?
I love the mindfulness in that. I mean, it really is meeting the person where they are, and not responding with anger and aggression, right? Because that usually shuts the conversation down. I know we're both reading Ruth King's book, Mindful of Race. And I love how she talks about anger, that it's initiatory, but not transformative. And in my practice, anger is usually a really difficult emotion for people to deal with. Is there a role for anger, and how do we manage it so that it doesn't escalate or shut down conversation or create more separation and hate? Really?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, anger is a valid emotion. I mean, we all have experienced anger, and there's very little we can do to stop the initial anger from happening. It's really about, for me, it's about how do I recognize where the anger is coming from? What are my beliefs? What are my thoughts behind the emotion? And then realizing that my beliefs aren't true. So this is a lot of Byron Katie's work. I'm a big fan of Byron Katie. And, as I've learned her process of inquiry for myself, first and foremost, I work on myself. So if I'm experiencing anger, and I do experience anger, I, get better and better over time as I continue to practice, quickly recognizing, hey, this is anger. This is what I'm feeling right now. And distinguish it from other emotions, because it might actually be a different emotion that I'm feeling, maybe sadness or grief. But if it's anger, I recognize it as anger. I see it. And then I also quickly get curious about, where is this coming from? Why is this my reaction right now to what this person said, or what this person is doing? And through that curiosity, I start to again, see it as anger as a thing. This person is a person and it's not their fault that I'm angry, and it's not my fault that I'm angry. And I just kind of make sense of it all. And usually through that, I can dispel the anger and get back to listening and being open. For others, again, if they're showing signs of anger, I see myself in them. So I recognize the emotion that I too have had anger, and I can empathize on that level. Even though we might have drastically different perspectives and points of view on the topic, what I can relate to is the emotion. We've both experienced the emotion. And then again, it becomes less personal. It's not them and it's not me. It's this thing out here that's an emotion. My goal typically is to be as patient as possible and to be as open as possible. And then sometimes I have to say, this isn't the time, and maybe we can circle back. And that sounded very corporate. Let's circle back. But you know what I mean? Maybe we can come back and discuss this again later.
Yeah, sometimes we can't get out of that, right?
I can't. I know.
What's great? I mean, first of all, you're bringing it back to yourself. And I think that really is the essence of mindfulness, that no matter what's going on around us, we tend to ourselves. Mm-hmm. And what I don't hear you talk about, and I find that significant, is shame, blame, and guilt. Is that something I also feel? We've talked about fear, we've talked about anger. It's coming up a lot. Sometimes people go into a shame spiral, perhaps over their family's history, or it's easy to go into blame. Tell me a little bit about that. Do you see that? How do you work with that?
Of course, I definitely see that emotion, and I've experienced that myself as well. But what I know to be true, having been in this for so long, is that the emotions of shame, blame, and guilt, while they're very valid emotions, those are real emotions and they're going to come up. I know to be true from being in this work is that they're not helpful. And so I think for myself or for others, if you're ever finding yourself blaming or shaming yourself or feeling guilty, honor it, recognize it, and then as best as you can, move to a more productive emotion. Because the longer you stay in that, the less productive you'll be able to be. You will likely not be able to stay in the room, metaphorically or physically. And so they just tend to not be helpful emotions. And again, don't shame yourself for having them, because you're human and you're going to, we will have a whole range of emotions. But when those specific ones come up, I find they're just not they're not good friends to have in that conversation. And so that's when you want to invite other friends in, maybe gratitude or, openness, grace. There's just other things to bring in that can help us move to a more productive emotion. And emotions are important to have, they're very great motivators. They inspire us. And, to be honest, I wouldn't want to not have emotions. I want to have the full breadth of a human experience. But for those unpleasant emotions or those unproductive ones, I think spending as little time in them as possible helps everyone, yourself first and foremost, but even those around you.
I like the metaphor of inviting other friends in, and I can also think of compassion, right? If we bring
Yes.
compassion in self and other compassion, or compassion practice, really an antidote. We've talked a
Yeah.
lot about emotions. I want to talk practically. What are three things everyone, and I mean everyone or anyone, can do to support diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, and you probably knew I'd go here, is to look within. And so I think all work starts with yourself. And so one is to get curious about your reactions to these various topics, whether it's race or privilege or power or gender or fill in the blank, whatever the topic is, recognize the emotion, because you're going to have an emotion, and recognize it, and then get curious and look at why is that emotion coming up? What are my life experiences? What, or lack of experience on the topic? What are my beliefs? What have I been taught? I think challenge what you've been taught. That's a really helpful tool, is to think, okay, I see something and I have a reaction, or I have a judgment about the situation. Maybe you see a homeless person. Let's just use that as an example. You see a homeless person on the street. Initial thoughts might arise, initial reactions might arise, initial actions might arise. You might move away, you might look away, you might, whatever it is that you do, get curious about that. What have I been taught about people who are unhoused? What do I believe about people who are unhoused? And lastly, might the opposite be just as true? So might I be wrong? Might I be incorrect? And just explore that. And as you go through various topics, keep exploring, like, why do I have this belief about people like them or people from there? Why do I have this feeling? And there's a reason. And it's, largely because of your life experiences you've had, your institutional learning that you've had, your culture that you were brought up in, what you've been exposed to over time. And so that's your starting point, is understanding yourself. Secondly, you want to widen your perspective, widen the lens. So, knowing that you've been taught certain things based on where you grew up and what culture you were raised in, and the family and region that you were raised in, and all those things, and things that you were exposed to in media and TV and all those things. So knowing that has shaped how you see things today, how can you intentionally gather additional information to add to your knowledge about the situation? So how can you get information about a population that maybe you know little about, from various sources of information that you didn't have access to before? And the beauty of technology today is you kind of have unlimited access to knowledge. And so it's actually quite easy to learn from other voices, learn about experiences of people who are not like you. And you can do it passively. You can just read other people's stories, or you can listen to videos, or watch, movies of different genres. And you can, you don't have to be so vulnerable that you're in an active conversation about it. You can passively be learning, and all of that goes into your knowledge base about a topic. And that's going to make you more confident and more comfortable to stay longer in the room, which is a good goal to have. Let's stay in this longer. Let's get more comfortable with it, and see that what I was taught is not the only aspect of that topic. There's so much more. It's a single story. There's actually a really great TED Talk by Chimamanda Adichie that is quite powerful, but it's called Danger of a Single Story. And so really, we all go around having single stories of others and ourselves. And so, by expanding your knowledge and your awareness and your education, you can start to fill in the full story. And when you have a full story of someone or something, a situation, then one, you have access to more decisions to make, access to more reactions, and also access to more mindfulness. You can sit in it calmly and you can respond versus react. Question your own beliefs and your own reactions. Expand your knowledge and awareness. And then I think it's just about being in the dialogue, being an active bystander. I think, as you mentioned, I've started posting a lot on LinkedIn. I didn't used to. I used to be a pretty passive social media person on Instagram and LinkedIn, and I loved reading and following other people, and I loved staying in touch and knowing what people were up to. But I didn't put my voice out there very often until recently. And it is very intentional to put it out there, and that's to be an active ally, an active bystander, and add to the conversation, And again, I'm not going to say that I'm right, but at least my point of view will add to the conversation.
Small steps, right? But then small steps or ripples create waves. I really believe that. I could talk for another hour. We have to wrap up, but I have 3 questions that I ask everyone is,
okay.
What does befriending your emotions mean to you? Why is it important if it is? And what are your favorite tools? And I think I know the answer to the third one, but I'll let you talk.
You probably do. So what does befriending my emotions mean to me? Well, as my goal is with any of my friends, my physical friends, I want to approach my friends with openness and kindness and grace and non-judgment. That's what I always strive to be for them, and to see them, that way, without judgment and with openness. And so if I'm adding my emotions to my friends list, then I would treat them the same way. I would treat them with openness and grace and non-judgment. And then why is it important to befriend? Because I know what happens if you don't. I have myself, attempted in the past to dismiss my emotions, bottle them up, try to change them, try to change something into something else. And that's not only mentally exhausting, it's inauthentic, to be honest. And I didn't like living inauthentically. And then my body and mind didn't like hiding it. And so I, experienced depression for many years. And I think there's many reasons why anyone experiences depression. For me, there are many reasons, but I do believe not addressing my emotions and dismissing them played a huge part in it. And so as I've learned how to be more open with them and be kind to them and honor them without judgment, that's really where my happiness has been able to really come through, and I can experience more happiness. So that's why it's important for me. And then some of my best tools is mindfulness tools. But really, I think deep breaths are always my go-to. Because again, my goal is to get curious about the emotions and not judge them, I have to just sort of calm my nervous system down to be able to do that. And so for me, deep breaths allow me to be like, wow, okay, I'm frustrated right now. Or, I even want to question when I'm really happy, because, what are my biases or what am I clinging to? It's just really good to be more, critical about a lot of things, and not in a negative way, but just curious, I guess, more curious.
And I so appreciate that you brought up the nervous system, because, well, that's a whole topic of how disconnected we are. But
yeah,
how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, you can, like I mentioned, I'm much more active on social media now. So my 2 main places that I participate, I guess, are Instagram and LinkedIn. On both of them, you can just find me as Janelle Aaker. So you can find me by just searching my name. And I'm also on Facebook, but I tend to just post mostly stuff about my family on Facebook.
Janelle, thank you so much. This was an absolute
joy
and pleasure.
I enjoyed it as well. I could talk about this, these topics all day, and it was nice to talk across your beautiful face. So thank you. Thanks for having me. And I look forward to speaking with you again.